Anyway, but that was like the situation. Gasoline was super cheap, $2 per gallon gasoline. Anyway, so just like, it was definitely not from the standpoint of like, oh, this is going to be a great investment and a way to make money. It was just like a terrible investment and we're probably going to die. So, anyway, so nonetheless, we got going. And the first thing we did was to create sort of a Tesla test mule, which was to take a Lotus Elise, and then highly modify it to add the Tesla battery pack and the AC propulsion drivetrain. And this is, I think, a point that may be helpful to entrepreneurs out there that are, creating companies. The reality is that the creation of Tesla was based on two fundamentally false premises that turned out to be, in retrospect, staggeringly dumb. So the one was that we'd be able to use a Lotus Elise, a sort of slightly modified Lotus Elise, add an electric powertrain using AC propulsion technology, and then be done, and that would work. And in reality, when you convert a car to electric, and you want to make it something that passes all of the federal safety standards and all the legalities necessary for a road legal car, you actually you invalidate all of the crash tests, and the battery pack ended up being too big to fit in the car, so we had to stretch the chassis, and we couldn't use the air conditioning system because that was previously run off of the motor or the engine power, so we need to have a new AC system. We had a new wiring harness.
All new suspension, all new brakes.
All new suspension, all new brakes, because the car was 30% heavier. The body was all different. In the end, only about maybe 6 or 7% of the Tesla Roadster had parts in common with any other car, period. Okay. And so it ended up actually being much worse than if we'd simply designed an electric car from scratch. It's like if you have a particular house in mind that you want to build. Instead of building that house from a fresh start, you take some existing house, and then you end up modifying everything except one wall in the basement. You're like, okay, that's actually much more expensive and harder to do than if you just design it and build it right from the beginning. And then the AC propulsion technology, while great for a prototype, actually ended up not being producible. Like it wasn't reliable, it wasn't producible, and it wasn't consistent, and it would break down all the time. So I don't know if this is
Yeah, I mean it was pretty amazing. The motor controller, the brain, the computer that actually controlled the motor was 100% analog. I mean, it was this unbelievable invention. Genius engineering to actually make it run at all, but it wasn't something we could reproduce. So among the sort of difficult engineering tasks we took on in the very early days, one was the battery pack, re-architecting the whole battery pack, making it liquid-cooled, making it safe.
Yeah, the liquid-cooled thing was really important because the AC propulsion battery pack, even though it used cylindrical lithium-ion cells, because it was air-cooled, it would very quickly overheat, and it was highly susceptible to a thermal runaway event. So if one cell went into thermal runaway, it would domino to the rest of the cells.
Yeah, and it was also packaged in the doors, which was not a very good place to package the battery pack.
Yeah, it's like, oh, how do I get out? Oh, I can't. It's on fire.
It was either side of the car. So re-architecting the entire battery pack, making it liquid-cooled, and it's still amazing to me how much of if you look at that first mule and put it next to a final roadster, they were phenomenally similar actually. It was a very innovative time when we came up with these kind of concepts and architectures that made it work. But one of the big things were the electronics in that brain. to control the motor, and we had to start from scratch. I mean, as Elon said, it would have been more efficient on the car. We did actually do that on the electronics, and some of the key engineers are here still that did that work. Drew Baglino is one of the folks. Do you want to
Drew, why don't you come up?
Maybe you want to share a couple of quick anecdotes or stories about some of those early motor control days?
Sure.
This has been 12 years, by the way. So
yeah, it has been a long
Drew
time.
was like basically part of like the founding team of the company. So
thank you, Elon. Yeah, just over 10 years for me now. So I'm on the time scale pretty early on here. But yeah, JB mentioned Alan Cucconi. Alan Cucconi actually. We tried to figure out what some of his circuits did, and we would simulate them and be like, oh, this is what it does. And then 3 months later, we'd be like, no, that's what it does. So it was kind of a learning by doing. But we needed to get out of this ghost in the machine world where we were with the analog PEM. And so we said, okay, about a team of 5 engineers, let's start from zero. Let's start with today's technology, digital motor control using DSPs. And we went out and set to do it as a parallel path so we wouldn't disturb the rest of the validation, because we had to go through crash tests, we had to go through performance tests, we had to run on rough roads for hours with cars that worked. But that didn't deter our determination. So we in like 3 months, we went from the first schematic to a driving car. And I actually remember that first day when we went out driving, and we brought JB along, and it was my first 4-second 0 to 60 experience, and I had never experienced anything like that. But my prior car was like 80 horsepower Civic or something like that, and it actually held together, and it was an amazing 4 seconds, and that certainly hooked me on electric, and I haven't looked the other way ever since. But after that, we decided to take this car for somewhat of a range drive, so we drove through over to Mountain View to Google. Actually went right by here with one of these digital motor control prototype cars. Colin was in the car. He's back there in the audience.
Hey, Colin, anything you want to come up and say?
And I remember I was staring at the waveforms, and we were like, ooh, maybe we've got a loose ground or something. And sure enough, like somewhere coming back to Redwood City, we actually had to pull over. And I remember JB, we were all like peeling back the top of the PEM cover. We had this like portable screwdriver just for this sort of exact use case. So we probe inside. We figured out it was a loose ground, fixed it, drove back, and we were like wheeling in, eking into the Bing garage with absolutely no power left.
That's St. Carlos, the Bing garage, yeah.
Oh yeah, the Bing garage.
It was super tiny.
Super tiny little garage. Yeah. And we almost had to wheel it in, but it actually got in on its own power, and then kaput, it was done. And actually, at that point in time, JB mentioned the motor control, but we actually were doing the charge control digital as well, all redone because it was analog before and really unreliable and finicky, especially when connected to like generators or long high impedance lines and things. So, but we hadn't solved the charge control digital for low battery SoC yet. And so we were like, oh no, we need to charge the car. And it was actually doing this, it had this problem, it was a bug at the time. It was doing this like self-destruct thing where it was running the compressor to cool the battery.
Full disclosure sort of.
Exactly. Even though it was the end of the state of charge, didn't make any sense. We were like, oh, we gotta get it on charge. So we ended up unplugging the compressor cable and charging it, backfeeding through like the DC connection of the compressor. But it was a very successful drive, all said. And digital became the plan of record. I flew out to Hethel with some other folks from the team to retrofit all the EPs with...
Hethel is Lotus. That's
yes.
Lotus's headquarters in England.
Yes. Yeah. So flew out there, we retrofitted everything to full digital, and then we started developing digital traction control, all the pedal feel that everybody still has in their cars today. That all came together for Roadster back then. And it was a ton of fun.
Yeah. In fact, I remember in the early days giving a test drive to Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who I've known for a long time, and there was some bug in the system, and damn it, the car would only go 10 miles an hour. It's like, look, I swear, guys, it goes way faster than this. Anyway, but they were kind enough to put a little investment into the company nonetheless, despite the world's worst demo.
But yeah, that's the digital motor controls story. It was this team of like 5 engineers, and we worked in a tiny little power cube for 3 months and got to the bottom of that problem and solved it. And we still build on the leverage of that technology today with all the cars that we have on the road.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing what we could do with small teams and pretty tiny budgets when we had this incredible focus. Every single thing was just solve this problem or else. Yep. So.
And that was another thing we learned, right? You can't just take AC propulsion technology and expect it to work. So we really wanted to get the heart of the machine, the heart of the car, into our IP, our code, and this was an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially when I say like the company was founded on 2 false premises. One was that you could easily modify an existing gasoline sports car to be electric, totally false. And the other was that we would be able to use the AC propulsion technology that we'd licensed for a production vehicle, also totally false. They'd done some great technology that worked well on prototype cars, but basically did not work at all well for a production vehicle. So anyway, but I think the lesson here for people thinking about creating companies is that even if your company starts off based on things that are completely untrue, that you don't know about, what really matters is adapting, is recognizing the mistakes and adapting quickly, and kind of fixing the sort of the false premises upon which the company was founded. That's what really matters, for people that thinking about creating companies. Just you got to adapt quickly, acknowledge and recognize your mistakes, and the sooner you do that, the better. So.
Should we ask Colette maybe?
Sorry?
Should we ask Colette to share a few stories too?
Yeah. So let's have Colette come on. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hello. My name's Colette Bridgman. I'm employee number 9 at Tesla, so I will be coming up on 12 years in July. So a lot of this history, as well as being Elon and JB's history, is my history. I'm super proud to be here. So back to what Elon was saying, is a company founded on an idea that didn't come to fruition. When I was interviewed, I was told that this company would be about 35 people.
Yep.
They had a 3-year business plan. We wanted to commercialize electric vehicles, which sounded brilliant to me, being the only non-engineer at the company for the first year. And that we would outsource everything. So as you guys can...
All turned out to be true,
yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So from what you guys know about Tesla, obviously that business plan took a complete 180 in the first 2 years. We're so vertically integrated from the top down. But it just goes back to saying, when you start a business plan and you think that the company is going to be one thing, and what it ends up becoming 13 years later is something totally different. But I think at the core of all of it is a company full of passionate people that are mission driven. And when you stand behind a mission, I think that what you think you can accomplish and what you think you can do isn't paralleled with what you can actually accomplish. So I want to take a moment to say thank you to these two who've been such an inspiration, and to all my fellow employees. We have lots of oldies out here that Drew, every time I look at Drew, I just think about those weekends that they would work in their little lab, and I would have to come in and pick up the paper airplanes from the ceiling and all over the floor, because it was a little bit of like a frat house back then, but super fun. And we've got dozens and dozens of stories about how this mule came to life, and how we all got here, and it's DNA that runs through the company to this day. So thank you.
cool. Thank you. So thanks, Colette. I mean, Colette's made a huge contribution over the company for the company over many years. So thank you for everything you've done. So then, so building the Roadster test mule, and you've heard a lot about that. Then we needed to get to an actual Roadster prototype that was sort of that was more of the production design. And so then we redesigned the body. I was basically the chief designer of the body. So if you like it or don't like it, for Roadster version 1 and 1.5, that's basically me. So, like my two favorite cars were the McLaren F1 and the Porsche 911. So if there's sort of elements of that in the design. I don't think I'm a good designer, by the way. But we're going to get to Franz, who is a really good designer. And actually, it's relatively easy to design a sports car that looks good because the proportions naturally lend itself to excitement and beauty. And it's incredibly hard to make a sedan that looks good. Like that's a whole different level.
Yeah, and this picture in 2006 was actually from our Roadster launch event. So this was a really pivotal event in the company's history. It was the time when we went out of stealth mode. Before this, nobody had ever heard of Tesla. We'd never had a single media article. We'd never taken any customer deposits. We had no customers. We had no sales team, actually. Nothing.
Nobody had heard of the company. They thought Tesla
Zero.
was a rock band. Or if you're a scientist, Nikola Tesla, of course. But in the public, like, oh, you mean the rock band? Okay, no. By the way, those guys are awesome. They've been huge supporters all the way along, and they never bugged us about the fact that we used their name and everything. Yeah, rock on Tesla, the band.
But this event was awesome. I mean, this was, we had 2 prototypes built at this time. So we had that yellow mule that we started out with, and then we built 2 working prototypes for this event. There was a red car and a black car. And we had this kind of concept at the time to do an event where we'd give customers test drives, and then we'd start taking reservations, and do it all at some giant big party, maybe at an airport. And this sort of formula became something we started to repeat, and it kind of became the Tesla DNA a little bit of how we would do product launches and start getting customers closer to the product.
This was at the Santa Monica airport, and basically in LA. So.
And it was awesome because we went from 0 to having all these customers, hundreds of them. We thought it was massive numbers, hundreds of them.
Yeah, we really thought that was crazy that like 100 people would buy our car. We had the names, we got 100 people to buy our car. That's amazing.
There was actually a projector, and we'd type in everybody's name.
Everybody's name, yeah.
And put it on the wall because we thought there'd be like 10, but it filled up. So anyway, it was pretty amazing, even though the cars were basically just hardly holding together.
Yeah.
I mean, those 2 cars were basically destroyed by the end of the night. That was most of our durability testing, and we had to drive them behind a curtain and actually pump ice water through parts of the powertrain in order to keep it from overheating, so we could keep going with more test drives. So nobody knew this at the time, and it was amazing though. I mean, we left that event with demand being 10 times what we expected, and a whole ton of engineering challenges to go solve, but we knew for sure that people wanted this car in numbers that nobody else expected they did.
Yeah, exactly. It was a hugely energizing event because we had no idea whether people would we thought maybe nobody will buy the car, except for friends and family or something. But we got total strangers bought the car, which was wow, that's really. Wow. Okay. So
it was a long road.
It was such a long road.
Much longer than I think we ever expected. From 2006, showing off 2 cars that could do a few test drives at an airport, through to when we actually would need to deliver those hundreds of cars we had sold.
Yeah. Hundreds. I mean.
The cars we rejected for.
Holy mackerel! Jesus. We have an army of cars here.
I'm looking like we're going to be able to deliver 4 cars to the sales team.
This is frightening.
What's going on here is the team has been doing a little bit of rework today. Remember I was talking to you earlier about the vehicle that had the noise?
Drivetrain issues, so we're swapping in the new one right now.
Let's not even wait for the analysis. Just put a new powertrain in, table it for analysis, and let's get it out there.
Absolutely.
Right now we're facing an issue, which is that it's a sort of a crisis of confidence among our customers. Yeah. I mean, if anybody's interested in, I think that there's a great movie by Chris Payne who did a well-known documentary called Who Killed the Electric Car, and then he did a follow-up documentary called Revenge of the Electric Car, and it ended up following four car companies, one of which was us. And so he actually, the movie actually follows what was the most difficult time for Tesla in its history, and multiple near-death experiences. So I'd really recommend. I just want to give a shout out to Chris Payne, who's just an awesome dude. And it's like, if you're curious about the seeing the early history of Tesla, the Revenge of the Electric Car is a great movie to watch and get a sense for things. We had so many, since as I said, we had no idea how to build a car. We had so many huge challenges with the Roadster. One of the biggest was that the transmission didn't work. And we'd actually contracted with 3 different companies to build the transmission, and because it was originally going to be a 2-speed transmission, because the motor from AC Propulsion, motor design from AC Propulsion, required a 2-speed transmission in order to achieve the specs that we promised for the Roadster. So you could not achieve the 0 to 60 time. You could either achieve the 0 to 60 time or the top speed, but not both, unless you had a 2-speed transmission for an electric car. And the problem is that an electric car transmission is really different from a gasoline car transmission, because the RPM is much higher, the torque transfer is much higher, and so when we'd work with these quite well-known companies building transmissions, the transmissions all broke because they just couldn't take the torque transfer and the RPM.